In this unit, we'll be focusing on the life, achievements, and contributions of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. In brief, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the leader of the oppressed, a jurist, an economist, first law minister of independent India, and also the principal architect of the Constitution of India. Dr. Ambedkar was born on 14th April 1891 to a Mahar family which was considered to be an untouchable caste. His family followed the preachings of Sant Kabir, the well-known social reformer and rebel of Varanasi. And it seems that this background had greatly influenced the philosophy and deeds of Dr. Ambedkar. Ambedkar was admitted into a school at Dapoli at the age of 5 along with his elder brother. But as an ex-Subedar, Ramji could not maintain his large family on his small pension, and thus he took up a job at Satara, and then the family moved on to Satara, where Bhim's mother passed away, and the entire burden of bringing up the family fell on the shoulders of his father. During his school days and after completion of high school, around this time, Ambedkar witnessed several incidents which conveyed to him the cruelty of the caste system in our country, and all these left an indelible mark on his sensitive mind. Now, to quote one such incident, Ambedkar and his elder brother were to meet their father, Ramji, who was working as a cashier at Gaugaon, and they had travelled by train up to Masur station, from where they were supposed to be received by their father. And they waited for several hours, and as he didn't show up, they hired a bullock cart for completing their journey. Now, this bullock cart driver, who was an upper caste Hindu, came to know that his passengers were untouchables, and he made them to get down there and then, and it was only after they promised to pay him double the amount he agreed to take them, but on the condition that his brother had to ride the cart and the cartman would follow on foot. Now, why their father didn't show up was simply because he had not received the intimation of their arrival. Now, Ambedkar and his brother had to travel from evening till night without a sip of water, because everybody on the road had come to know that they were untouchables and even refused to quench their thirst. And although Ambedkar had experienced humiliating treatment meted out at him because of his accident birth in an untouchable family, he had also the good fortune to receive completely unexpected kindness from certain enlightened persons of the so-called upper caste. Now, for example, having made a bet with a schoolmate of his, Ambedkar walked several miles to the school in a heavy downpour, and his teacher, a Brahmin surnamed Pense, who saw him in this condition, was touched at the sight of the scantily clad Ambedkar shivering after his long and arduous journey, and asked his son to take Ambedkar to his house and to give him dry clothes and warm food to eat. And at the same time, there was another Brahmin teacher in the school with the surname Ambedkar, who somehow had a soft corner for Bhim and treated him like his own child. he used to share a part of his own lunch with Beam every day. And on the other hand, Beam's original family surname was Sakpal, and it was the kindness of this teacher which made Beam ultimately adopt Ambedkar as his surname. In fact, it was this teacher, Ambedkar, who himself changed Beam's surname from Sakpal to Ambedkar in the school records. So, this is the surname by which Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was to go down in history. Now, when Beam was about 10 years old, his father decided to marry again, and Beam naturally did not like the idea of having a stepmother and took the decision to be independent of his father for his daily needs. And to achieve this, he even thought of taking up a petty job in one of the cotton mills in Bombay. And he even considered stealing some money from his aunt to enable him to reach Bombay. However, his good sense made him realize that he must somehow pursue his studies and make his mark in the world. And from that day onwards, he became a diligent student and came to be loved even more by his teachers. Later, the family moved to Bombay, and Ambedkar and his brothers were admitted to the Maratha High School. And Ambedkar's desire to concentrate on studies became more intense after his family shifted to Bombay. And this desire was generously supported by his father, who even went to the extent of borrowing money from his two married daughters for purchasing of books for Ambedkar. And later, Ambedkar was admitted to the Elephantstone High School, which was at that time one of the best high schools of Bombay. And even here, he was not free from the shadow of untouchability. Although he was deeply interested in learning Sanskrit, he was not allowed to do so as he was an untouchable. And it was because of this reason that he was forced, much against his will, to choose Persian. But later, his unconquerable will enabled him to become a scholar of high caliber in Sanskrit, the very language he was forbidden to learn in his school days. Despite all the hardships imposed upon him for being an untouchable, he passed the matriculation examination in 1907 from Elephantstone High School, and he scored the highest marks in Persian. Now, it was a time when students belonging to the suppressed, oppressed, and depressed community had no tradition of learning and getting educated, as the Shastras did not allow them to do so. And an untouchable from a village coming to the district headquarters or the capital city of the province for school education was something which could not even be dreamt of in those days. And therefore, Ambedkar's completion of his school education was indeed a milestone in the history of the untouchables of India. And the event was celebrated by his community. A special meeting was called under the presidency of S.K. Bole, a well-known Maharashtrian social reformer, and was also attended by another social reformer and Marathi scholar, Shri K.A. Kelusukar, an assistant teacher at the Wilson High School, Bombay. Now, Kelusukar had often met Ambedkar in a garden where both of them would spend long hours in studying. And the latter became so fond of Ambedkar that he not only permitted him to borrow extensively from his wide collection of books, but also presented him a copy of his own book entitled Life of Gautama Buddha. And it would be accurate to say that this book had a great impact on the mind of Ambedkar and prepared him for his ultimate conversion to Buddhism. And as per the customs of those days, Ambedkar was compelled to marry soon after passing his high school examinations. And at the time of marriage, he was only about 16 years, and his bride, Rami, was hardly 9. And after the marriage, she was given a name or new name, Ramabai. And then he joined Elephantstone College, Bombay, and after he had passed his intermediate examination, he was in no position to continue his education as the family had no money. But luck favored him, and his old well-wisher, K.A. Kelusukar, having come to know of the Ambedkar's difficulties, he approached the then Maharaja of Baroda, His Highness Sir Saiji Rao Gaikwad, who was a noble-hearted and broad-minded ruler. And the Maharaja of Baroda had made an announcement at a meeting in Bombay, offering his help to any worthy untouchable who wanted to pursue higher studies. And at the request of Kelusukar, the Maharaja of Baroda called Ambedkar and asked him some searching questions. And having been completely satisfied with Ambedkar's reply, assured him of financial help for pursuing higher studies. And Ambedkar was granted a scholarship of rupees 25 per month, and this was quite a big amount of money in those days. And then he continued his studies and passed his BA examinations in the year 1913. After his completion of BA, he was selected for the post of a lieutenant in the Baroda's State Army. Now, then he received a telegram in January 1913, hardly a fortnight after joining the service, that his father was critically ill in Bombay. Now his love for his father gained the upper hand over his own worldly interest, and he immediately leaves for Bombay. And his father passes away in 1913 on February 2nd. And after this, once again, his life has a turnaround. And then in June 1913, the Maharaja of Baroda announced that he would send some deserving students to the United States of America for higher studies at the Columbia University at the state's expenses. And on hearing this, Ambedkar took the earliest opportunity of meeting the Maharaj at his next visit to Bombay and expressed his earnest desire to be given a chance to avail this opportunity. The Maharaja, who was already convinced of Ambedkar's intrinsic worth, advised him to apply for one of the scholarships offered by the state. And on June 4, 1913, he, along with 3 other applicants, signed an agreement in the presence of the Deputy Minister for Education of the Baroda state, conveying his willingness to devote his entire period of stay in the United States of America for studying the prescribed subjects, and then serve the state for a period of about 10 years after the completion of his studies at the Columbia University. And it was a turning point in the life of Ambedkar, and America then was considered to be a dreamland, as it symbolized the principles of freedom, equality, and fraternity. And the ideas of Abraham Lincoln were still fresh in the American soil. And after arriving at Newark, for the first time, he had an opportunity to move, think, and act freely without the stigma of untouchability haunting him forever. And his inborn intelligence and deep insight at last found the proper atmosphere for growth and development. And the letters written by him to his friends and relatives from Columbia University during his period is an example for the freedom and liberty that he practiced there. And in one of his letter written to a friend of his father, he advocated the cause of women's education, and he emphasized that the education of young women was as important as that of young men. And if the goal of social progress was to be achieved, the education of women was much important. He was determined to make the best possible use of the unique opportunity which circumstances had thrown in his way, and he applied himself with a single-minded devotion to his studies. And he also did not waste time by indulging in recreational activities. And moreover, he had the responsibility to send a part of his stipend to maintain his family. And to do this, he even cut down his food. For his MA course, Ambedkar took up difficult and diverse subjects like political science, moral philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and economics, and studied for as many as 18 hours a day. And in 1915, Ambedkar was awarded his MA degree for his thesis entitled Ancient Indian Commerce. Apart from this, he also presented a paper entitled Castes in India, Their Mechanisms, Genesis and Development in a seminar on anthropology in the year 1916. And in this paper, he traced the origin of the caste system and also pointed out its evil consequences. And in June 1916, he submitted his thesis for PhD degree to the Columbia University. And the title of the thesis was The National Dividend of India, a Historic and Analytical Study. And later on, this thesis was enlarged and published as The Evolution of Imperial Provincial Finance in India. And the entire book was highly critical of the British bureaucracy and of the British imperial system, and brought out Ambedkar's love and concern for his country. And after the successful completion of his studies at the Columbia University, Ambedkar left Newark in 1916 for London, and in October 1916, he entered the Garys Inn for doing his bar at law, and also simultaneously enrolled himself in the famous London School of Economics. And his stay in London was once again made possible by the benevolence of the Maharaja of Baroda, who gave him the permission to continue his studies in England on state scholarship. But however, the Diwan of Baroda took a different stand, and Ambedkar was asked to come back. And before leaving England with a heavy heart, he obtained special permission from the London University through the kind recommendation of his professor, Dr. Edwin Cannon, to resume his studies in London within a period not exceeding 4 years from October 1917. And he returns to India in 1917 and reaches Baroda as per the bond that which he had signed before joining the Columbia University, that he would serve 10 years for the state of Baroda after completion of his studies. And here the Maharaja wanted to appoint him as the finance minister after giving him a chance to gain some experience in the field of administration. And to begin with, he was appointed the military secretary to the Maharaja. And even though he attained this high position, the stigma of untouchability did not stop pursuing him. And even the peons considered it below their dignity to give him a glass of water. No hotel was prepared to put him up, and in desperation, he sent a note to the Maharaja, who referred the matter to the Diwan. But there was nobody who could do anything about it. And deeply disappointed by this, he bids goodbye to Baroda and comes back to Bombay. And in Bombay, he gets in touch with another enlightened prince, the Maharaja of Kolpur, Shahu Maharaj, who had been trying to do his best to break down the barriers of the caste system and help the untouchables in every possible way. And this turned out to be another turning point in his life. The Maharaja of Kolhapur not only appointed the untouchables to posts in his personal staff, but he also provided the untouchable students with free education. Boarding and lodging facilities were also provided, and he even went to the extent of taking meals with them in public. And thus it could be truly said that Shahu Maharaj was one of those few persons whose heart revolted against the tyranny of the caste system, and whose sympathies were genuinely with the unfortunate downtrodden castes. And in 1919, the Maharaja of Kolhapur helped Ambedkar to start a fortnightly paper. The paper was named as Muknayaka, and it came out in January 31, 1920. And even though Ambedkar was not its editor officially, the paper became his mouthpiece. He made full use of it to expose, with his brilliant logic, the irrationality and the basic injustice inherent in the caste system. And the reason why Ambedkar did not become the official editor of the paper was that in November 1918, he was appointed on temporary basis as the professor of economics in the government College of Commerce and Economics in Bombay. And his sole aim in accepting the post was to save sufficient money to go back to England and complete his unfinished studies at the London School of Economics. With this in mind, Ambedkar continued to live a very simple life, and he also gave a fixed amount of his salary every month to his wife Ramabai. Finally, by July 1920, Ambedkar had saved sufficient money and also got some financial help from the Maharaja of Kolhapur, besides a loan of Rs 5,000 from his old friend Naval Bathena, whom he had met in Columbia University. So this enabled him to leave for London in July 1920. And he pursued his studies in economics at the London School of Economics and was called to bar simultaneously. And his painstaking research work in London resulted in completing his thesis entitled Provincial decentralization of imperial finance in British India, for which he was awarded the degree of Masters of Science in the year 1921. And the following year, he completed another thesis entitled The Problem of the Rupee for the University of London. And working hard on these two theses, he hardly had any time left to pursue for the degree of barrister at law, and he was not able to appear for the examination. Before that, he made a trip to the famous University of Bonn in Germany for taking up higher studies in that institution. And during this preliminary visit to Bonn, he had arranged his admission to the university and returned back to London in the year 1922. And soon after submitting his thesis on the problem of the rupee to the University of London in 1922, he proceeded to Bonn. But at the same time, his thesis had raised a furore in the academic world of the University of London because of his frank and forthright criticism of the British fiscal system in India. And even a socialist professor like Harold Lasky was convinced, like many other scholars or professors of the University of London, that Ambedkar was an Indian revolutionary, and hence he was called back to London in 1923 March by Professor Edwin Cannon, who asked him to rewrite his thesis. And accordingly, Ambedkar rewrote his thesis and sent it to him without changing any of the conclusions drawn by him from his studies in April 1923. And this time, the University of London accepted the thesis and awarded him the degree of Doctor of Science. And later, a modified version of his controversial thesis was published by Miss King and Son, London, a famous publishing house of London of those days, in December 1923. And Ambedkar dedicated the publication to the memory of his father and mother, to whom he owed so much. At the same time, he was also honest enough to acknowledge to his intimate friends that although Professor Cannon had asked him to rewrite his thesis, he had the magnanimity of not compelling him to change any of his conclusions. Controversial though they were, instead, Professor Cannon had the magnanimity to pay a handsome compliment to Ambedkar by acknowledging the stimulating freshness in his views and reasons. And the reason for the furor caused by Ambedkar's thesis were simple, because in it he had explained in clear terms the manner in which the relationship of the Indian rupee to the British pound was artificially manipulated by the former imperialist rulers, causing a crushing financial burden on the Indian economy. And by now, Ambedkar had acquired qualifications which very few of his contemporaries had. And though the hardships he had to go for accomplishing were indeed enormous, and judged by any standard, he proved himself to be a person of an extraordinary intellect. And he never flinched from telling the truth. And despite Western education and its influence, he had deep roots in the Indian soil and spent the rest of his life in identifying the problems of his motherland and in finding out the ways to solve them. In April 1923, he returns back to India and starts practicing as a barrister from June 1923. But here again, Ambedkar's caste stood in his way, and the litigants belonging to the upper caste were not willing to hire even such a highly qualified barrister, and those who did were mostly from the poorer sections who could pay either a very little or no money at all for his services. And Ambedkar was naturally depressed by these conditions, but his spirit was, as usual, undaunted, and his determination and enthusiasm unabated. And on the other side, Ambedkar also faced other problems, as in those days, when the country was ruled by the British, there was a widespread belief that hiring the services of European barristers was the key to winning a case, as most of the judges were European. And on the other side, the difficulty faced by Dr. Ambedkar was the fact that solicitors, who were mostly from upper caste Hindus, did not wish to have any business dealings with an untouchable. Ambedkar therefore had to face a difficult situation, even in a profession for which he was eminently qualified. But despite all this, he was extremely confident that someday he would definitely succeed and make a mark in his chosen profession. And later, Dr. Ambedkar launches his movement for the upliftment of the untouchables. And he convened a meeting on March 9, 1924, at Damodar Hall, Bombay, to discuss the need of establishing a central organization for removing the innumerable handicaps from which the untouchables suffered and for placing their grievances before the government. Following this meeting, a society named Bahishkrit Hitakarni Sabha was formed to promote the interest of the untouchables. And the principal aims of the Sabha were to promote the spread of education amongst the untouchables, to promote the spread of culture amongst the untouchables by opening libraries, study circles, etc., to improve the economic status of the untouchables by starting industrial and agricultural schools, and to bring the grievances of the depressed classes to the attention of the government. The president of the Sabha was Sir C.H. Setalvad, an upper caste Gujarati Hindu and a brilliant lawyer of his days. Its vice presidents included eminent persons like M. Nissim, G. K. Nariman, Dr. V. P. Chavan, and B. G. Kher. Now, this was because Ambedkar had a firm belief that untouchability should be a concern not only of the untouchables but of all the sections of the Indian society. And being a completely rational person, he was firmly convinced that untouchability could be removed only by bringing about a complete reform in the structure of the entire Hindu society, and not merely by showing gestures like taking food with untouchables, shaking hands with them, or treating them with kindness or courtesy. And he firmly believed that a complete reconstruction of the Hindu society, including the abolition of the caste system by an act of Free India's legislature, the abolition of the system of priesthood, which was confined only to the Brahmins, and the standardization of the scriptures, rituals, and religious practices for the entire Hindu society, could remove the stigma of untouchability effectively and permanently. Further, realizing the need to have a proper forum for expressing his views, Dr. Ambedkar started his fortnightly Marathi paper, Bahishkrit Bharat on April 3, 1927 in Bombay. The main purpose of this fortnightly paper was to keep the depressed classes well informed about the happenings in the land, and through this he also posed many penetrating and thought provoking questions before the upper caste religionist, like if eating meat and beef made some Hindus untouchables, why was this not applied to the Christians and Muslims? And also why some of the communities who never touched meat were categorized as untouchables. And he also taunted those upper caste Hindus who were asking the British government to act in a democratic manner and to treat Indians as equal, and at the same time were against similar treatment being given to the untouchables, although they were as good Hindus as themselves. And he went to the extent of stating in one of his editorials that had Lokmanya Tilak been born an untouchable, he would have raised the slogan, "Annihilation of untouchability is my birthright," instead of "Swaraj is my birthright." Further, the Mahad struggle made Dr. Ambedkar a hero of the depressed classes throughout the country, and his voice was listened to with respect not only in the Bombay Legislative Council but also outside it. The success of the struggle had a far reaching effect on the untouchables and made them aware of their power. And here, Dr. Ambedkar received the support of some of the enlightened members of the upper caste. For instance, Lokmanya Tilak's son, Sridhar Pant, was a friend and admirer of Dr. Ambedkar, and he even went to the extent of organizing a choir of untouchable boys at a function held in September 1927 in Tilak's famous Gaikwad Wada, despite the opposition of the trustees of the Kesari. And with this, Ambedkar stressed the fact that views held by many untouchables that all Brahmins were their enemies was completely wrong. And he wanted to fight the spirit of the Brahminism, that is, the notion of high born and low born, and not the Brahmin community as such. And he also said that to aim low is a crime. According to Ambedkar, some men say that they should be satisfied with the abolition of untouchability only, leaving the caste system alone. The abolition of untouchability alone without trying to abolish the inequalities inherent in the caste system is a rather low, not failure, but low aim is a crime. And thus he says that let us probe the evil to its very roots and not be satisfied with the mere palliatives to assuage the pain. And he further says that if the disease is not rightly diagnosed, the remedy will be useless and the cure may be delayed. And hence, Ambedkar questions that suppose the stigma of untouchability was wiped out, what would be the status of the present day untouchables? And he says that at the most they would be treated as Shudras, and what would be the rights of the Shudras? To this, he further says that the Smritis treat them as a mere helot, and the Smritis are the guides of the caste Hindus in the matter of gradations in the caste system. That is to say, even though the untouchability is abolished, the status or the conditions of the untouchables would remain the same, that of Shudras, where they would have various restrictions with regard to access to various things. So he wanted to change the entire system, because of which the untouchability was in practice. And he further says that the caste system must be abolished if the Hindu society is to be reconstructed on the basis of equality. And untouchability has its roots in the caste system, and one cannot expect the Brahmins to rise in revolt against the caste system. At the same time, one cannot rely upon the non Brahmins and ask them to fight our battle, because many of the non Brahmins were interested in bringing the Brahmins down rather than raising the level of the suppressed classes, as they too would want a class of people on whom they can look down upon and have the satisfaction of not being quite the underdogs of the society. All these meant that the suppressed people must fight for their own rights, and they should not, that is, the suppressed groups should not depend or rely upon anyone else to get them justice. So he further says that untouchability has ruined the untouchables, the Hindus, and ultimately it would ruin the nation as a whole. So he says that the day the depressed classes gain their self respect and freedom, they would contribute not only to their own prosperity, but by their industry, intellect, and courage, would also strengthen the prosperity of the nation. And Dr. Ambedkar views the religion and says that a religion which discriminates between one of its followers and another is partial, and the religion which treats crores of its adherents worse than dogs and criminals and inflicts upon them insufferable disabilities is no religion at all. Later, Dr. Ambedkar got involved more and more in public activities, and he started taking active interest in social work, even at the cost of neglecting his flourishing legal practice. And he did so because he deeply felt that his work and mission were not to earn money or amass wealth, but to bring about a complete transformation of the Hindu society. And he wanted to secure for the so called untouchables a place of honor in the Hindu society, which had been unjustly denied to them because of historical distortions. And as a member of the Legislative Council of the Bombay Presidency, Dr. Ambedkar seized every opportunity to put forth his views on the subject in a forceful manner, and an outstanding example of the various measures which Dr. Ambedkar took as a member of the Legislative Council was the bill introduced by himself on March 19, 1928 to amend the Bombay Hereditary Offences Act of 1874. According to this act, the Mahars in the government service were required to work round the clock, and if a Mahar in government service absented himself from duty even on valid grounds like illness, he was under the law required to place the service of a member of his family at the disposal of the government during his period of absence. Now, before introducing the bill to amend, Dr. Ambedkar prepared the draft of the bill, and he moved the bill in the council on August 3, 1928, with an impassioned appeal to the government based on legal, financial, and moral grounds to repeal the Bill of 1874. And he spoke for almost 2 hours with all logic and reasoning at his command. And the entire Legislative Council heard him without interruption. However, it was finally decided that the amendment bill moved by Dr. Ambedkar may be referred to the Select Committee, comprising 23 members of the Council. But it was indeed tragic that the Select Committee, which was packed either by orthodox upper caste Hindus or by staunch Muslims, opposed the bill, and with great disappointment he finally withdrew the bill. And in the meantime, he had accepted the post of acting professor at the Government College of Law, Bombay, from June 1928. And he was almost forced to accept the post, as having plunged deeply into social work and having become a member of the Bombay Legislative Council, he could devote no time to his legal practice. Thus, he had no other means of livelihood, and this post was the only means to keep himself and his family alive. In the year 1930, Dr. Ambedkar started the temple entry movement in Nasik after 3 months of painstaking and meticulous preparations. And that was the characteristic of his style of functioning. Here, the Satyagraha Committee of the depressed classes at Nasik had informed the trustees of the famous Kalaram temple that a satyagraha totally non-violent in nature would be started if the trustees did not allow the untouchables to enter the temple and to worship their god. At the same time, in response to the call of the Satyagraha Committee, almost 15,000 volunteers had assembled in a specially erected pandal in a predominantly untouchable area of the city. And it was worth emphasizing that volunteers included not only untouchables but also Brahmin individuals like B.G. Kher and many other like-minded upper caste individuals. And the assembled participants discussed the ways in which the satyagraha was to be conducted, and the deliberations went 2 hours together. And then they launched a protest or a non-violent struggle in front of the gates of the temples, and started singing the bhajans. But the Bombay police and the armed police took over the protesters or non-violent peaceful protesters, and this treatment meted out to those perfectly non-violent satyagrahis moved even the heart of some of the enlightened upper caste Hindus. And the same evening, a public meeting of the citizens of Nasik was held to voice out their sympathy for the satyagrahis. And this non-violent satyagraha continued for a long time. And later, a compromise was arrived at between the upper caste Hindus and the untouchables, and it was agreed that the physical strongmen of both the untouchables as well as the upper caste Hindus, but the upper caste Hindus broke the reasonable agreement, and before the untouchables could reach the chariot, some of the upper caste Hindus physically pulled the chariot away. And this was done with the convenience of the local British magistrate. And this didn't end there. Further, it resulted in the expelling of children of the untouchables from schools, closing of the roads to them, and not allowing them even to buy the articles of their daily needs from the local markets. And even the untouchables in several neighboring villages were not spared. And they were subjected to harsh treatment, including physical violence. Now, despite all these provocations, Dr. Ambedkar successfully kept his fellow satyagrahis under check, and he did not allow them to retaliate. Despite all these, the temple continued to be closed to the untouchables till 1935. And later, the first session of All India Depressed Classes Congress was held at Nagpur in the year 1930 under the presidency of Dr. Ambedkar. And here in his speech, he said that the movements of social reform will result in the emancipation of our people and the establishment of such a state of society in this country of ours in which one man will have one value in all domains of life, political, social, and economic. And in the 1930, the first roundtable conference, Dr. Ambedkar and Rao Bahadur Srinivasan were invited to represent the depressed classes. And Dr. Ambedkar the formal invitation to attend the Roundtable Conference through the Viceroy on September 6, 1930. Now, here Dr. Ambedkar made a memorable speech, and to quote him, while I want to emphasize the fact that 1/5 of the total population of British India, a population as large as the population of Britain, had been reduced to a position worse than that of the serfs or slaves. However, I maintain that the untouchables in India were also for replacing the existing government by a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And further in his speech, Dr. Ambedkar posed some direct and inconvenient questions to the British government. Again, to quote Dr. Ambedkar, when we compare our present position with the one in pre-British days, we find that instead of marching on, we are marking time. Before the British, we were in the loathsome condition due to our untouchability. Has the British government done anything to remove it? Our wrongs have remained as open sore, and they have not been righted, although 150 years of British rule have rolled away. Of what good is such a government to anybody? We must have a government in which the men in power will give their undivided allegiance to the best interest of the country. We must have a government in which men in power know where obedience will end and the resistance will begin, will not be afraid to amend the social and economic code of life, which the dictates of justice and expediency so urgently call for. And in the concluding part of his speech, Dr. Ambedkar quoted Edmund Burke, the well-known British political philosopher, who said that the use of force is but temporary, and sounded a stern warning to the British government as well as other participants of the Roundtable Conference in the following words. To quote Ambedkar, I am afraid it is not sufficiently realized that in the present temper of the country, no constitution will be workable which is not acceptable to the majority of the people. The time when you were to choose and India was to accept is gone, never to return. Let the consent of the people and not the accident of logic be the touchstone of your new constitution. If you decide that it should be worked. And this speech of Dr. Ambedkar had caused a stir not only among the delegates of the Roundtable Conference, but also the British government and even the British Prime Minister was deeply impressed by it. The Maharaja of Baroda, who was also a delegate to the Roundtable Conference, was also deeply touched by Dr. Ambedkar's speech. And it is significant to note that after the preliminary sessions in the Roundtable Conference, 9 subcommittees were formed, and Dr. Ambedkar found a place in every important subcommittee except the Federal Structure Committee. And another important fact is that Dr. Ambedkar held in-depth discussions with Dr. Monge, and both of them arrived at the same conclusion in respect to the rights of the depressed classes. And they made a joint declaration to the British and American journalists who were covering the Roundtable Conference. And they announced that there was no reason for the depressed classes to disagree with or dissociate themselves from their co-religionist. And the Declaration of Fundamental Rights, drafted by Dr. Ambedkar for protecting the cultural, religious, and economic rights of the depressed classes in the future independent India, was fully acceptable to the Hindu leaders and, in particular, Dr. Monge. Now, when the Second Roundtable Conference in 1931, Gandhi, in his speech, had claimed that Indian National Congress was the sole representative of all Indian interest, religions and caste, and his argument was based on the fact that Muslims, Hindus, people belonging to the depressed classes, Christians, Parsis, and others are not only its active members but also holding or having held important positions in the party. And Gandhi even went to the extent of assuring Indian princes that the Congress had refrained from any interference in the internal affairs of any of the Indian princely states. And Gandhi also went on to say that his party also stood for the rights of the Indian women because it had Dr. Annie Besant and Srimati Sarojini Naidu as its president. And in reply to this, Dr. Ambedkar, with his rationality and logic, bluntly told the Indian princes that the Federal Structure Committee could not give them everything that they wanted, including total non-interference in the internal affairs of the states. And he went on to say that before an Indian princely state was allowed to join the contemplated Federation of India, it should be in a position to prove beyond doubt that it had the necessary resources as well as the capacity to provide its citizens, subjects, a civilized life. Another important point which was made by Dr. Ambedkar in a speech was that the states' representatives to be elected to the proposed Federal Assembly should be chosen by franchises open to all and not by nomination by the rulers of the states. And Dr. Ambedkar further stated that acceding to the demand made on behalf of the rulers would be against the basic tenets of freedom and democracy. And it is to be conceded that this was in fact the first speech made in defense of the rights of the people of the then Indian princely states. Moving on, the first meeting of the Minorities Committee was held on September 28, 1931, and in his opening address, the British Prime Minister admitted that the problems of minorities in India was indeed a baffling one. And after some discussions, Dr. Ambedkar stated that while he had no objection to the secret talks which were going on between the congressmen and the Muslim leaders, he would not allow the congressmen to decide the fate of the depressed classes, and that any settlement between the congressmen and the Muslim leaders would not be binding on him and the depressed classes. His speech was characterized by his usual eloquence and logic, and the chairman, Sir Ramsay MacDonald, the British Prime Minister, had to say, Dr. Ambedkar has made his position absolutely clear in his usual splendid way. He has left no doubt at all about it. The performance of Dr. Ambedkar in the Roundtable Conference had made him a well known figure throughout the country as well as abroad. And even the most diehard of the Hindu leaders had to sit up and take note of his brilliant performance at the Roundtable Conference, which had been acclaimed not only by the British but also the American press. Moving on to the Pune Pact, in the year 1932, British announced the formation of a separate electorate for depressed classes. While Ambedkar was in favor of this, Gandhi fiercely opposed a separate electorate for untouchables, saying he feared that such an arrangement would divide the Hindu community. And Gandhi protested by fasting while imprisoned in the Ayurveda Central Jail of Pune. Following the fast, Congress politicians and activists such as Madan Mohan and Palankar Balu organized joint meetings with Ambedkar and his supporters at Ayurveda. And on September 25th, 1932, the agreement known as Pune Pact was signed between Ambedkar on behalf of the depressed classes among Hindus and Madan Mohan Malviya on behalf of the other Hindus. The agreement gave reserved seats for the depressed classes in the provisional legislature within the general electorate, and due to the pact, the depressed class received 148 seats in the legislature instead of the 71 as allocated in the communal award earlier proposed by the British ministry, Ramsay MacDonald. Now, later, the temple entry movement got stronger, and Ambedkar was making a visible impact throughout India. And at the same time, Gandhi had made a public declaration to go on to fast with the issue of the entry of untouchables into the famous Guruvayur temple in the state of Calicut. And the ruler of Calicut was also equally adamant on this issue, and he refused point blank to throw the gates of the temples open to the untouchables. And further after this, Sri Rangaiyer, although himself an orthodox South Indian Brahmin, was compelled to introduce a bill in the Central Assembly entitled the Untouchability Abolition Bill. And similarly, various bills were passed by various members of the Central Assembly. And on being appraised of these heartening developments, Gandhi extended the time limit for starting his fast unto death up to January 1, 1933. And Gandhi also requests Dr. Ambedkar to give his full support to the bills in regard to the question of temple entry introduced by Dr. Subramanian in the Madras Legislative Council and by Sri Ranga Iyer in the Central Legislative Council. But Dr. Ambedkar firmly but politely told Gandhi that he would have nothing to do with Dr. Subramanian's bill because it did not condemn untouchability as a sin and only stated that if referendum favored temple entry, the temples should be thrown open to the depressed classes. And Dr. Ambedkar went on to tell Gandhi that the depressed classes were no longer prepared to be treated as Shudras or untouchables. And to this, Gandhi pleaded with Dr. Ambedkar on the issue and stated that, according to him, the Hindu caste was not a bad one. And to quote Gandhi, let the touchable Hindus have an opportunity to expiate their sins and purify Hinduism. Government would take advantage of this, and if this reformation takes place, the untouchables would rise in the society. But however, Dr. Ambedkar politely and firmly disagreed with Gandhi on this statement and stated that he was convinced that if the untouchables were allowed to make progress in the economic, education, and political fields, temple entry would follow automatically. It was therefore to him an irrelevant issue, that is, the bills. And further, he tells Gandhi that untouchability could not be removed unless the caste system was removed from the Hindu society. And further, he made his opinion public in a message which he gave to the first issue of Harijan started by Gandhi in the year 1933 with a special aim to acquaint the country with the plight of Harijans. And now, in his message, to quote Ambedkar, the outcast is a byproduct of the caste system. There will be outcasts as long as there are castes. Nothing can emancipate the outcast except the deconstruction of the caste system. Nothing can help Hindus and ensure their survival in the coming struggle against the British except purging the Hindu faith of this odious and vicious dogma. And Gandhi, in his reply, stated that although many educated Hindus hold the same view as had been expressed by Dr. Ambedkar, he was for once not prepared to share it, being a firm believer in the caste system. And this resulted in parting of Ambedkar and Gandhi in two ways. While no one can doubt Gandhi's sincerity for purpose in his efforts to remove the stigma of untouchability from the Hindu society, one has to agree that his insistence on perpetuation of the caste system was completely incompatible with his attitude towards the untouchables. And it seemed that although Gandhi was a man of action, a humanitarian with the sincerity of purpose, he also had a much stronger streak of emotionalism than of rationalism. And it could also be possible that his early upbringing as the son of the Diwan of a princely state, where the caste system had always been held as a sacrosanct and immutable, uh, this might have fixed his ideas firmly on this issue. And Dr. Ambedkar's wife passes away on 27th May 1935. And although a firm non believer in the traditional Hindu rituals, Dr. Ambedkar got the last rites of his deceased wife performed in the traditional Hindu manner. And he even got his head shaved and put to saffron clothes during the period of mourning. And soon after his wife's death, he had been offered the post of the principal of the Government College of Law, Bombay, which Dr. Ambedkar accepted. Although in mourning, Dr. Ambedkar, with his usual determination, not only took classes but also looked after the administration of the college. Now, coming back to the Pune Pact, some things were happening in and around the Pune Pact. That is, the government of India had announced its decisions to hold elections to the Central Assembly, and Sri Gavi, a well-known untouchable leader of Vidarbha, had made an appeal to Gandhi, entreating him to declare publicly his attitude towards the Pune Pact and also requesting him to adopt 5 depressed class persons as candidates of the Congress party, without imposing any preconditions for contesting the forthcoming elections to the Central Assembly. Now, Gandhi's reply was rather strange. On one hand, he reaffirmed his belief in the Pune Pact, and on the other, he rejected the suggestions of Sri Gavi for adopting 5 representatives of the untouchables to contest the Central Assembly elections on the Congress ticket. And then, further, there was a proposal for the establishment of a second chamber, that is, the Legislative Council. And Ambedkar stated that the depressed classes were opposed not only to the proposed establishment of a second chamber, that is, the Legislative Council, but also to its proposed compositions. And Ambedkar's argument was based on the fact that it would defeat the very purpose of the Pune Pact, as the depressed classes candidates had almost no chance of winning elections against the more affluent upper caste Hindu candidates. And at the same time, he firmly stated that he was still a party to the Pune Pact. And he only wanted it to be implemented in its true spirit and letter. And further disheartened by the stand taken by the Congress leaders on the Pune Pact, Dr. Ambedkar began to debate in his mind as to what further course of action he and his followers should adopt in order to attain their goal. And at the same time, a news item appeared in several of the newspapers that Dr. Ambedkar was going to make a declaration of conversion at Depressed Classes Conference to be held in October in the year 1935. And this news came as a thunderbolt to the more sensible leaders of the upper caste Hindus. Some of them, like Sri N.C. Kelkar and Professor S.M. Mate, sent a joint letter to Dr. Ambedkar promising him a change of heart on the part of the caste Hindus and appealing him not to make the proposed announcement. Now, even initially, Dr. Ambedkar had made a statement that he and his followers would not renounce Hinduism, the religion of their forefathers, that they would only strive to ensure the basic civic rights of the untouchables as equal members of the same religion, that is, the right of temple entry, the right of access to public tanks and wells, to draw water for drinking and bathing, and free access to other public institutions like schools, libraries, dharamshalas, etc. And he had also signed the Pune Pact after Gandhi had made a personal appeal to him. However, he had by this time come to the sad conclusion that caste Hindus were not sincere in the promises they had made to him, and even as late as the 1930s, when a group of untouchables from a village near Nasik decided to embrace Islam, Dr. Ambedkar persuaded them to wait for some time more and see whether the caste Hindus did what they had promised to them, that is, to remove untouchability. Further, the Depressed Classes Conference was held at Yola on October 30, 1935, and it was attended by over 10,000 untouchables from many parts of the country, including the then Hyderabad state and the central provinces. And here in his speech, Dr. Ambedkar once again narrated the story of miseries heaped upon them, that is, the untouchables, by the caste Hindus in all walks of life, economic, social, educational, and political. He also pointed out that in spite of these hardships, they had made great sacrifices to secure the minimum human rights which were available to their upper caste co religionists, and lamented that the upper caste Hindus were not prepared even to grant or guarantee the untouchables that these minimal civil rights, and to allow them to live in honor within the folds of Hinduism. He thus expressed the opinion that the time for making a final decision on this issue had arrived, and since the indignities and humiliations to which the untouchables were subjected to arose from the fact that they were Hindus by accident of birth, he posed the question before the delegates of the conference whether it would not be better for them to leave the Hindu fold and to embrace some other religion which would give them an honorable and equal status. And at the same time, he had the wisdom to warn his followers that they had to be very careful in choosing their new faith and not to make a hasty decision. And in the course of his speech, Dr. Ambedkar declared that the religion was for the man and not the other way around. And he uttered those famous words. To quote, "I solemnly assure you that I will not die as a Hindu." Now, Dr. Ambedkar's announcement created a storm not only in different political parties but also shook the social institutions. Now, offers began to come to Dr. Ambedkar from the top leaders of different religions like Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and the famous Muslim leader of that period, Shri K.L. Gauba, MLA Punjab, sent a telegram to Dr. Ambedkar assuring that Muslim League would wholeheartedly welcome him and his followers into Islamic Brotherhood and would ensure that they were given equal rights with the other Muslims of the country. At the same time, Bishop Badley of Bombay expressed the view that Dr. Ambedkar's statement was welcome to the Christians because it indicated an ambition on the part of the depressed classes to achieve their rights as human beings and not to be treated almost like beasts. And further, the secretary of Mahabodhi Society of Benares also sent a telegram to Dr. Ambedkar that he and his followers were welcome to embrace Buddhism, which was professed by the largest part of Asia and also guaranteed equal status to all converts. And in reaction to this, Gandhi said that Ambedkar's opinion of conversion was unfortunate one, and according to Gandhi, untouchability in India was already on its last legs, and though he could comprehend the anguish of a highly enlightened person like Dr. Ambedkar over the atrocities committed on the untouchables by the caste Hindus, he did not approve of conversion. And he further says that religion was not like a house or a clock which one can change at will. It was an integral part of one's own self, and that he was convinced that a change of faith by Ambedkar and those who pass the resolution will not serve their cause, as the millions of unsophisticated illiterate Harijans will not listen to Ambedkar, and those who have disowned their ancestral faith, especially when it is remembered that their lives, for good or for the evil, are inextricably involved with those of caste Hindus. And one instance that can be quoted here is that a famous Hindu missionary leader, Masurkar Maharaj, was instrumental in reconverting about 10,000 Christians to the Hindu fold, had appealed to Dr. Ambedkar to withdraw his announcement because the conversion of the untouchables to another faith than Hinduism would spell the doom of the Hindu society itself. And Dr. Ambedkar had sadly admitted that he agreed with Masurkar Maharaj, and also stated that although he was himself not happy at the idea of conversion, the way to avert the impending tragedy lay only in the hands of the upper caste Hindus. And he also told Masurkar Maharaj that the only way out appeared to be that the caste Hindu leaders should honestly make a pledge to exterminate the stigma of untouchability from Hindu society within a prescribed period of time. And Masurkar Maharaj, although agreed with Dr. Ambedkar, pointed out to him the enormous magnitude of the problem and pleaded with him for more patience. And later on, a deputation comprising various Hindu castes, headed by Sri R.G. Pradhan, called on Dr. Ambedkar in an effort to assure him of a positive result and to persuade him to withdraw his decision of conversion. And to this, Dr. Ambedkar replied, to quote, "Some people think that religion is not essential to society. I do not hold this view. I consider the foundation of religion to be essential to the life and practices of a society. At the root of Hindu social system lies dharma as prescribed in Manusmriti. Such being the case, I don't think it is possible to abolish inequality in Hindu society unless the existing foundation of the Smriti, religion, is removed and a better one laid in its place. I, however, despair of Hindu society being able to reconstruct itself on a better foundation." And later, he also tells the delegation that he was prepared to wait for 5 years, and if during this period the upper caste Hindus could assure him and his followers by positive deeds and not by mere words of a real change of heart, he was willing to reconsider the entire position. Moving on, the Government of India Act of 1935 promised provincial autonomy to the people of British India and announced that the elections to the provincial assemblies would be held in 1937. Thus, the beginning of the year marked a keen interest and activity among all the political parties as well as leaders as this would be the first occasion when the people of British India would be able to elect their representatives in the various provinces by adult franchise. And after having been disillusioned by the attitude of the upper caste Hindus during the last few years, especially after witnessing the fate of the Pune Pact, Dr. Ambedkar rallied his friends and lieutenants and found a new political party called Independent Labour Party in August 1936, and the party announced a comprehensive program which aimed at meeting all immediate needs and voiced the grievances of the landless, poor tenants, agriculturalists, and industrial workers. Its programs also emphasized the need for social reforms in the society as well as a detailed plan for proper village sanitation and housing. And he started his election campaign by touring all the districts in Bombay Presidency and explaining to the people the aims and objectives of his party. And during the course of his hectic election campaign, he extended the support of his party to some enlightened candidates of other parties like Sri L.B. Bopatkar, the leader of the Democratic Swaraj Party, whom, with another enlightened Brahmin, Sri N.C. Kelkar, had parted company with the Congress several years ago because of its attitudes towards the problems of the depressed classes. And in return, Sri Kelkar issued a special appeal to the voters of Bombay to vote for Dr. Ambedkar, whom he called the uncrowned king of the depressed classes, and a person who had attained the highest academic qualifications and a certain measure of fame by hard work, sincerity of purpose, and endless struggle. And finally, the elections took place on February 17, 1937, and the results were declared, and Dr. Ambedkar came out victorious by beating his rival by a large margin of votes. But unfortunately, Sri L.B. Bopatkar lost, although he had put up a really brave fight against the heavy odds. The most remarkable thing was that of the 17 candidates put up by Dr. Ambedkar, as many as 15 were elected. Another feather in his cap was the verdict delivered by Bombay High Court on March 17, 1937, in which it upheld the decision of the assistant judge of Thana regarding the use of water of the Chaudhar tank at Mahad by the untouchables. Dr. Ambedkar as a legislator. The first occasion on which Dr. Ambedkar had to cross swords with Sri B.G. Kher was the introduction of a bill in the third week of the August 1937, proposing a salary of Rs 500 per month for a minister in addition to house and conveyance allowances. And in criticism of this bill, Dr. Ambedkar put forth forcefully his argument that four considerations should be kept in mind while discussing or passing the bill, that is, the prevailing social standards, the competence, democracy, and integrity and purity of administration. And he went on to argue that if salaries were being fixed in accordance with prevailing standard of living in the country, the ministers ought not to draw salaries exceeding Rs 75 per month. And during the period when Provincial Assembly was not in session, Dr. Ambedkar availed himself of the opportunity of continuing his campaign for the upliftment not only of the depressed classes but also of the agricultural laborers who were virtually held in bondage by the owners of the cultivated fields. And during his campaign, Dr. Ambedkar addressed several meetings in the Bombay Presidency, And on September 17, 1937, at the Pune session of the Bombay Assembly, he introduced a bill to abolish the Koti system of land tenure in the Konkan area of the presidency. And it needs to be emphasized that Dr. Ambedkar was the first in India who introduced a bill for the abolition of the serfdom of agricultural tenants, which had been perpetuated for the past several centuries. And another memorable clash which had taken place between Dr. Ambedkar and the ruling party was on one of the articles of a new bill aimed at the amendment of the Local Board Act, in which the scheduled castes were given the definition of Harijans, that is, the people of God. Here, Dr. Ambedkar's dedicated follower in the Legislative Assembly, Shri B.K. Gaikwad, proposed an amendment seeking that the appellation Harijan may be deleted. And the speech made by Gaikwad was drafted in consultation with Dr. Ambedkar. And to quote the speech, if the untouchables were the people of God, were the touchables assumed to belong to the monsters? If all the people were to be called Harijans, we should not object. It is no use only giving the untouchables a sweet name. Something practical should be done to ameliorate their condition. But, however, the amendment was thrown out when put to vote because of the overwhelming majority of Congress members in the Assembly. And in response to this, Dr. Ambedkar rose up from his seat and declared, to quote, "I am very sorry, but I think I cannot help saying that this is a matter on which the wishes of the group, that is, the untouchables, ought to have prevailed upon the government. Nobody would have been hurt, and the interest of the country would not have been injured if the amendment of my honorable friend Mr. Gaikwad had been accepted. In view of the fact that government wished to use its majority in a tyrannical manner, I am afraid we must show our disapproval by walking out in a body and not participating further in the day's proceedings." And in a bid to pacify Dr. Ambedkar and his fellow legislators, Shri B.G. Kher stated that the word Harijan was polite. He traced its origin to a hymn of the Gujarati saint Narsi Mehta. And in reply to this, Dr. Ambedkar stated that though he was not able to suggest any better name for the untouchables, it would have been appropriate if the ruling party had discussed the matter with the untouchable legislators before moving this amendment. And he also added that Sri Kher's argument were not convincing, and he staged a walkout from the assembly followed by his fellow legislator belonging to the depressed classes. Although continuing to campaign the cause of the untouchables, Dr. Ambedkar did not forget to fight for the rights of the workers, whose interests were of a major concern to the party founded by him, that is, the Independent Labour Party. And in September 1938, the Bombay Legislative Assembly took up for consideration the Industrial Disputes Bill, and both Dr. Ambedkar and Sri Jamnadas Mehta opposed the bill firmly. Dr. Ambedkar, in his forthright manner, described the bill as retrograde and capitalistic, favoring the industrialist at the cost of the workers. This further led to a bitter war of words between Dr. Ambedkar and Sri K.M. Munshi, who was the Home Minister in B.G. Kher's ministry. However, being in a majority, the Congress party passed the bill, and soon afterwards, a program of action was chalked out by the Independent Labour Party and the Bombay Presidency Trade Union Congress. And a one-day strike was declared on 7th November 1938, and a call was given to all the mill workers of Bombay to participate in the strike. A labour rally was held at the Kamgar Maidan in the evening of November 6, 1938, which was attended by at least 80,000 labourers and was presided over by Sri Jamna Das Mehta, who made a bitter attack on the Congress ministry for passing such an act. And on the morning of November 7, 1938, a strong posse of police took up positions at different strategic points at 5:30 a.m. The Home Minister Shri K. M. Munshi personally supervised the arrangements. The strike was totally peaceful, and one of its major features was a tout of the mill areas by Dr. Ambedkar and Sri Jamna Das Mehta in a lorry, from which they exhorted the mill workers to make the strike a success, but in purely a non-violent manner. The strike was successful, although it was marred by a few unpleasant incidents. At one place, some antisocial elements resorted to stone throwing, because of which people were injured, including one police officer and some constables. And the police had to open fire to disperse the crowd, in which 2 persons were injured. The same evening, another massive meeting of the workers was held at the Kamgar Maidan, Bombay, under the presidentship of Sri Jamna Das Mehta, who congratulated the workers for having staged a successful and peaceful strike, and strongly denouncing the government and the mill owners. And in his speech, Dr. Ambedkar stated that he was even now prepared to join the Congress if it made a sincere promise to fight against British imperialism. And this strike established Dr. Ambedkar not only as a leader of the depressed classes, but also a successful leader of the working class. By this time, Dr. Ambedkar had become an unquestioned leader of the weaker sections of the society. His qualities as a leader of the downtrodden were clearly expressed in his speech at Nagpur on 20th July 1942, where he said, to quote, "You have less need of an assurance from me that I will fight for the ideal. I stand in greater need of an assurance from you. You have assured me of your love and affection. It was quite unnecessary. I want an assurance of another kind. It is an assurance of strength, unity, and determination to stand for our rights, fight for our rights, and never to turn back until we win our rights. You promise to do your part, I promise to do mine. With justice on our side, I do not see how we can lose our battle. It is a matter of joy to fight this battle. The battle is in the fullest sense spiritual. There is nothing material in it. For our struggle is for our freedom. It is a battle for reclamation of human personality, which has been suppressed and mutilated by the Hindu social system, and will continue to be suppressed and mutilated if in the political struggle the Hindus win and we lose. My final words of advice to you are: educate, organize, and agitate. Have a faith in yourself and never lose hope. I shall always be with you, as I know you will be with me. In the third week of June 1942, it was widely rumored that the Viceroy and the Governor General of India were thinking of expanding the Executive Council and that Dr. Ambedkar's name had been included in the list of the new members. And this news was confirmed with the announcement of Dr. Ambedkar's inclusion in the Executive Council. And the Times of India, Bombay, pointed out that it was the first time in the history of the country that an untouchable Hindu had been appointed as a member of the Viceroy's Executive Council. And he was handed over the labor portfolio in the Viceroy's expanded Executive Council. And this was naturally bitterly criticized by the Congress party. However, at a reception held in his honor by the Depressed Classes Welfare Association in New Delhi, Dr. Ambedkar announced that high office held no charm for him and that he would be the first to quit and go back to Bombay if he found that his efforts as the labor member were unsuccessful in improving the conditions of the workers and toilers of the country. Dr. Ambedkar was also an eminent educationist and he started Siddharth College on June 20, 1946 under the auspice of the People's Education Society, founded by him on July 8, 1945. The main aim of the People's Education Society was the advancement of educational interests of the lower middle classes, especially those belonging to the scheduled caste. And however, while appointing the teaching staff to these newly founded institutions, Dr. Ambedkar's sole criterion was merit and not caste, with the result that several positions in these institutions were and still continue to be manned by really competent persons belonging to the upper caste. Thus, the first institution founded by Dr. Ambedkar was the Siddharth College, Bombay. Siddharth was one of the Buddha's many synonyms, and Dr. Ambedkar wanted the teachers and the students in his institutions to follow Buddha's teachings, and according to him, Buddha stood for social freedom, intellectual freedom, economic freedom, and political freedom. He taught equality not between man and man only, but between man and women. Buddha's teachings covered almost every aspect of the social life of the people. His doctrines are modern, and his main concern was to ensure salvation to man during his life on earth and not after his death. And the second institution founded by the People's Education Society was the Milan College at Aurangabad. Its foundation stone was laid by Dr. Rajendra Prasad in September 1951, and the institution was named after the Greek king Menander. And further, People's Education Society started many more such institutions at various places in Maharashtra. And Dr. Ambedkar used to visit these institutions quite often and used to address the staff and students. His addresses were full of information, and he used to narrate his own experiences as student. And he often said that a person remained a student throughout his life, and he advised every person to read, maintain his personal library, and be helpful to the needy people in the society and around him. And there were times when he could be seen standing in the sun, supervising the construction work of the building and giving instructions on all sorts of technical matters. And during his visits, he used to stay in a small room of the college building instead of going to a hotel. And his opinion was, to quote, "Why spend money unnecessarily? Ours is a society meant for poor people. I am fully satisfied with this arrangement. What I need is just a Baji Bakar. And to quote one incident that is worth narrating, it so happened that some friends went to Aurangabad Hotel and saw by chance the famous actor Dilip Kumar and his sister, who had come to spend some time and visit world famous Ajanta and Ellora caves and see the frescoes. And his friends thought of taking him to Dr. Ambedkar with an intention that he may donate some money to the institution. But to their surprise, Ambedkar got very much annoyed and told them in very angry tone, to quote, I do not want donations from actors, industrialists, or businessmen, nor would I name my institutions after such persons. That is why I have named these after Siddharth and Milind. Staff and students should learn from such great religious preachers and visionaries who are known for their values, moral caliber, and intellectual integrity. I am always ready to make sacrifices for great values and ideals. And after this, his friends had went to meet Dilip Kumar to know his reaction. And his comments were, Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar is like my father. I fully appreciate his views. The making of Indian Constitution. Upon India's independence on 15th August 1947, the new Congress-led government had invited Dr. Ambedkar to serve as the nation's first law and justice minister, which he accepted, and on 29th August he was appointed as the chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee. And the text prepared by Ambedkar provided constitutional guarantees and protections for a wide range of civil liberties for individual citizens, including freedom of religion, the abolition of untouchability, and the outlawing of all forms of discrimination. Further, Ambedkar argued for extensive economic and social rights for women and won the Assembly's support for introducing a system of reservations of jobs in the civil services, schools, and colleges for members of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and other backward class. The Constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949 by the Constituent Assembly. Besides the drafting of the Indian Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar also introduced the Hindu Code Bill in the Constituent Assembly on 11th April 1947. The bill stated that the property, including both movable and immovable property, should be acquired by a woman. The acquisition of property should be made by a woman before and after marriage, even during the widowhood, from her parents or husband. And a dowry system would be paid as a condition and consideration. Also, the share of the property of each unmarried daughter shall be half that of each son, and the share of each married daughter shall be 1/4 of that of each son. Thus, the Hindu Code Bill covered the right to property, order of succession to the property, maintenance, marriage, divorce, adoption, minority, and guardianship. And Ambedkar resigned from the cabinet in the year 1951 when the parliament stalled his draft of the Hindu Code Bill, which sought to enshrine gender equality in the laws of inheritance and marriage. It has to be noted here that the Orthodox Hindu and the President of the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, was also against the bill. And later in the year 1955, the laws relating to marriage, adoption, maintenance, divorce, etc. were passed. Coming to the Great Conversion. Dr. Ambedkar had been since 1935 contemplating a change of religion for himself and his followers. However, he wanted to be careful in choosing the new religion, and after a great deal of thought and reading books on different religions, Dr. Ambedkar finally decided that he would embrace Buddhism. And on May 24, 1956, he announced in Bombay that he would get converted to Buddhism in October 1956. In between, he kept himself busy in writing the monumental book entitled The Buddha and His Dhamma. And at the same time, his health was deteriorating. And after consulting his friends, he announced that he would embrace Buddhism on 14 October 1956 at Nagpur, the well-known city of Maharashtra, which had once been a historical center of Buddhism in the country. Bhikkhu Chandramani of Kushinara in the district of Gorakhpur was invited by Dr. Ambedkar to initiate him into Buddhism. And finally, on the morning of October 14, 1956, there was a huge crowd of men, women, and children peacefully waiting for Dr. Ambedkar's arrival at the Diksha Bhumi. And Dr. Ambedkar arrived there in a white silk dhoti and a white coat, and more than 5 lakh people were eagerly watching the initiation ceremony being performed by the Bhikkhu Chandramani. Dr. Ambedkar and his wife repeated the 5 vows administered to them by the Bhikkhu Chandramani, that is, abstinence from killing, stealing, telling lies, wrongful sex life, and drinking. Finally, they bowed before the statue of Lord Buddha 3 times and placed the petals of white lotuses at its feet, and he then addressed the gathering and announced the 22 pledges which he had himself formulated, while uttering the words, to quote, "I renounce Hinduism." Dr. Ambedkar became highly emotional and his voice choked, and it must have been a moment of great anguish for him to have been compelled to renounce the religion of his forefathers. He then asked those amongst the huge crowd who wanted to embrace Buddhism to stand up. The entire gathering rose in response, and then he proceeded to administer to them the 3 refutes, the precepts, and the 22 pledges. Dr. N.B. Niyogi, the ex-Chief Justice of the Nagpur High Court, also embraced Buddhism on this occasion. And neither he nor his wife, who herself was a doctor, suspected that life was going to end soon. And they had also made plans for living for Bombay. But however, the fate willed otherwise, and Dr. Ambedkar passed away in his sleep in the early morning of December 6, 1956. And he was posthumously awarded India's highest civilian honor, Bharat Ratna, in the year 1990. To mention few of the works of Dr. Ambedkar, The Untouchables, Who Are They, Who Were the Shudras, Annihilation of Caste, Philosophy of Hinduism, India and the Prerequisites of Communism, Revolution and Counter-Revolution, Buddha or Karl Marx, Riddles in Hinduism, Essay on Untouchables and Untouchability, The Problem of the Rupee, State and Minorities, Rise and Fall of Hindu Women. Now coming to the aspect of Dalit as subaltern, Dr. Ambedkar was one of the most dominant political thinkers of India, and he critically looked at the caste system in India and its rigidity. And he also took up the issues of Dalits and Adivasi subalterns. he studied the impact of caste system upon the lower caste people and also analyzed it. Here, Dr. Ambedkar argued that subaltern communities that have been discriminated against for centuries identify themselves as Dalits. The term Dalit is used to refer to low caste people, and in general terms, Dalit also refers to scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. But in political sense, the term Dalit refers to scheduled caste. And this term, that is the scheduled caste, was first introduced by the Simon Commission in 1927 and later adopted by the Government of India Act 1935. And according to Dr. Ambedkar, Dalithood is a kind of life condition that characterizes the exploitation, suppression, and marginalization of Dalit people by the social, economic, cultural, and political domination of the upper castes, that is, Brahminical ideology. So, Dr. Ambedkar was of the opinion that until and unless the downtrodden themselves come forward to fight their battle, no one else could elevate their grievances. So, self awakening, he believed, could provide them necessary strength to fight against evils in the society. And he further opined that self elevation was not achieved by the blessings of others but only by one's own struggles and deeds. And further, in his Annihilation of Caste, Dr. Ambedkar emphasized that the Smriti and Shastras were not the embodiment of religion but a system of rules to deprive the untouchables even of their basic needs and deny them equal status in the society. Therefore, he said that there is no hesitation in saying that such a religion must be destroyed, and there is nothing irreligious in working for the destruction of such a religion that which discriminated against its own people, whom it bracketed as untouchables. Another aspect of Dr. Ambedkar's subaltern approach was the emancipation of Dalits and their empowerment as a distinct formulation of Indian nationalism in opposition to the dominant discourse of Hindu nationalism. And his conception of nationalism articulated and synthesized the national perception and aspirations of the downtrodden. So Ambedkar's alternative form of nationalism, popularly known as Dalit Bahujan Samaj, also incorporated the subaltern philosophy of Jyotirao Phule and Periyar. It constructed an anti-Hindu and anti-Brahminical discourse of Indian nationalism, and it aimed at establishing a casteless, classless society where no one would be discriminated on the basis of birth and occupation. Dr. Ambedkar coined the term graded inequality, and in which he differentiates between inequality and graded inequality. Now, inequality can be seen in different forms like racial features, occupational aspects, etc. So, the differences in the occupational aspects or administrative aspects like superordinates and subordinates, and the differences in working or industrial sector like the proletariats and the bourgeoisies, etc., signify inequality. As such inequalities were based on the nature of productive work in which one was engaged in. But whereas graded inequality, according to Ambedkar, is one of the specific feature of Indian Hindu social order, in which the status is ascribed on the basis of caste, and the inequalities is also associated with the caste status one has been ascribed. And in the Hindu caste system, there is a hierarchy in which four varnas are placed in a hierarchical order, and in which the status of these varnas are fixed. So here the untouchables are outside the varna classification, and they are graded as lowest in the caste system. They are not only different from others, but also unequal by birth, and accordingly their social and economic statuses are determined. So according to Ambedkar, the caste system in India is a unique form of graded inequality where, except Shudras and untouchables, the rest enjoy privileges according to their hierarchical social status in the traditional social structure. So, this gradation of people on the basis of caste is graded inequality for Dr. Ambedkar. And he further says that inequality is a social condition that which is created by the dominant sections in the society with the help of religion or ideologies to suppress the weaker sections in a society and to keep them checked. Now, when inequality is imposed in a system of caste, it gives less scope for change and less scope for one to improve one's own social status. And he further says that even though changes are taking place in society, structurally, more or less, caste remains the same rigid system in the society. And he further says that changes in caste status cannot take place unless the caste system is abolished and it is replaced by a casteless society. He further says that in other forms of social inequality, the working class have the option to fight against the owner of the industry for discriminatory practices. But the same is not possible in the aspect of caste system because according to the caste ideology, the upper caste have the rights and privileges over the lower caste below them in the caste hierarchy. And as the rights of the caste categories are graded, making radical change was almost impossible. And he was very critical of the working of the caste system and the processes of social exclusion and discrimination of the lower caste, especially the Dalits. And he was very critical to even Gandhi's idea of Varna and religious institution having nothing to do with the caste. So he says that caste system is not merely a division of labor, it is also a division of laborers. And he further says that no society has an official gradation laid down, fixed and permanent, with an ascending scale of reverence and a descending scale of contempt. But the scheme of the Purusha Sukta is unique in as much as it fixes a permanent warrant of precedence among the different classes which neither time nor circumstances can alter. The warrant of precedence is based on the principles of graded inequality among the four classes. He further says that Brahmins have succeeded to idealize the real and to realize the ideal, that caste is divine, caste is sacred, and the practice of untouchability is dharmic conduct, nothing of a sin. So, graded inequality is the soul of the four varnas, and it is dangerous because everyone, every caste has internalized it. It gives to everyone social advantage, expressing its differences from others, constituting its identity, its uniqueness. He further says that all have grievances against the highest and would always look for about their downfall. But at the same time, they will not be ready to combine, either with the high, the low, and the lower, lest they should reach his level and his equal. That is, the low is anxious to pull down the highest and the higher, but he would not make a common cause with the lower for the fear of lower gaining a higher status and becoming his equal. That is, in the system of graded inequality, there is no such class as completely underprivileged class except the one which is at the base of the social pyramid. The privileges of the rest are graded. Even the low is a privileged class as compared with another lower caste or class, and each class being privileged, every class is interested in maintaining the social system. Now, to put it in simple words, India has numerous castes, and within caste there are many subcastes. Now here, the social status or positions of each subcaste are not equal. That is, within one main caste, the subcaste under that caste have differential status. So the subcaste B, for example, has a better status than the subcaste C. And at the same time, the subcaste C has a better social status than subcaste D. Whereas the subcaste E, which is lying at the bottom of the caste hierarchy, does not have a better status than the above subcastes. And subcaste A, that which is at the top of the hierarchy, enjoys all the privileges and even more privileges compared to all the other subcastes below it. So that is to say, each caste or each subcaste have their own privileges, but excluding the last caste or last subcaste, which is at the bottommost position in the hierarchy. And further, according to Dr. Ambedkar, the graded inequality excluded the lower caste not only socially but also economically. For example, the Mahar caste do not get work opportunity in the weaving department because they are not supposed to touch the thread due to the factor of purity and pollution. Thus, the internalization of the caste ideology by the lower caste subalterns make them feel obliged to the upper caste or the masters, and it makes them unaware of their strength, which remains unrecognized. That is, the absence of class consciousness. Thus they become submissive, and their submission is one of the key issue of their subordination. Thus, Ambedkar became the central figure in anti-caste movement in India, and he formed Bahishkrit Hitakarni Sabha to register the protest against the atrocities on the Dalits by the upper castes. And the motto of the Sabha was to educate, organize and agitate. And he opines that until and unless the Dalits rise and fight, they would not achieve their rights. So the self-awakening was one of the best ways to eliminate the social evils like caste-based untouchability, etc. Now here, he traces the origin of the caste system and its ideology of discrimination towards the sacred Hindu manuscripts like the Manusmriti and such other writings that have legitimized the caste oppression. And he says that such texts set the base for social discrimination based on one's birth, and hence he advocated destroying of such texts. And on 25th December 1927, he led thousands of followers to burn copies of Manusmriti. Thus annually 25th December is celebrated as Manusmriti Burning Day by Ambedkarites and Dalits. Now, this burning of Manusmriti by Ambedkar was a step towards a great struggle and to make a satyagraha, to negate the mythological basis of the caste hierarchy and untouchability. Now, to conclude, it could be said that Dr. Ambedkar was a person born far ahead of his time, and this is exemplified when he was a student of Columbia University, wherein he wrote letter to his friends signifying the importance of women's education to bring in social progress or change. And further, when he introduced the Hindu Code Bill, also he stressed on the need for progress by improving the conditions of not just the Dalits or Dalit men, but also the women. And it was not only about Dalit women, but women in general belonging to all caste or races. Now, if we observe his life as a student, he went through extreme humiliations, but it did not result in any setbacks in his life, and he fought all those humiliations and went on to achieve something great which no one else would have achieved. And it didn't stop there. Even after achieving such great heights, he worked for the welfare, also the upliftment of the Dalits and the untouchables, and he also attempted to improve the life of both the lower class people as well as the laborers as well as the women. So this says that he was not a self-oriented person, but he always thought about social welfare and social progress of the entire community, and to bring about a change or to reform the Hindu social structure, that which was based on mythological ideas, and because of which various forms of discriminations were imposed upon the people on the basis of their birth. Now, as a social reformer, he rejected many attractive offers and continued his struggle for winning the social and political rights for the downtrodden people. And Dr. Ambedkar had also declared that uplift of the untouchables was the uplift of the nation. He was a hardcore rationalist, and his writings and speeches signify this aspect. And he did not believe in false beliefs, superstitious rituals or observances, and he always went by logic and reason. And more importantly, he was against hero worship, and at the same time he did not allow his followers to do it either, because he was very much conscious of the evils of hero worship and the havoc it had caused in the country down the centuries. And the reason, according to him, to keep away from hero worship was that over-regard for leaders saps self-confidence of the masses, leaving them helpless when left leaderless in the hour of a trial, or when led by unscrupulous leaders. Finally, it could be said that he was a dynamic person, and the kind of dynamic personality India has never witnessed after Dr. Ambedkar. He was daring to question various aspects, various practices, and at the same time, he was direct in his criticisms, and he was also ready to acknowledge things. And he was never reluctant to fight for the cause of the welfare of the people. Now, he is also not free from critics, and many opine that reservation can never be the solution to empower the Dalits. Now, it has to be understood here that Dr. Ambedkar never supported the lifelong reservation system, but rather, considering the fact that the Dalits were oppressed for decades together, he wanted to help them to come up in their life, and thus reservation was introduced. And Dr. Ambedkar had certain years of reservations in mind, but the governments kept on continuing it for their political reasons, or for the vote bank politics, if you could say. And some others view that he had one-sided view of caste at the expense of national interest. That is, some critics argue that he was more interested in giving a better status to the exploited ones, and this came at the expense of his national interest. Considering his harsh critic against Gandhi in certain point of time. To add to a point which I missed in the above explanation, that is, after the death of his wife Ramabai, Dr. Ambedkar married for the second time, and he married a doctor and social activist Savita Ambedkar.